Anyway, Percy Jackson.
And this concludes our podcast about pizza and laundry.
Pizza and chores. Yeah. What's good? Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of The Newest Olympian. My name is Mike Schubert. I'm the titular Newest Olympian. I'm a grown man. I'm a 30-year-old man. It's the first time I've said that on an episode. Look at that. Big old boy.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I did a whole lot. Really, shout out to my parents. That's the people you should congratulate on birthdays, not you, your parents. They did it. You didn't do anything. Anyway, I'm a grown man. I didn't read the Percy Jackson books as a kid, but I'm reading them now. I'm on the second book. We're a couple chapters in, and we're on a quest to determine whether or not Percy Jackson and the Olympians is a book series that we've all been sleeping on as a society. And I'm not on this quest alone. I said we, because today I am joined by, in his words, not mine, quote, a formerly relevant person on the internet, but a currently relevant frisbee player, is Caleb Denecour. Caleb, how's it going?
It's going great. You know, we had a nice snowstorm yesterday, got to shovel a bunch, so just living it up in the Midwest.
Love that. I was going to say your forearms look fantastic.
Thank you.
I don't miss having to shovel. I was very fortunate in my snow shoveling career in that I lived in New Jersey until I was 14, and then we moved to Texas. So right before I was getting to, hey, Mike, you should start shoveling the snow age, we got out of there. So that was really nice. And I've never really had to shovel a lot of snow in my life, which I think is pretty good. I think I've made the correct choices.
Yeah, it's not the most fun, although I did, when I lived in Austin, have to shovel a little bit, kind of. It was more like brushing. I brought the broom out because there was a light dusting. I was like, I know this is going to melt and freeze on my driveway, potentially. So I just went and brushed it off. It was barely anything. So kind of happened once in Texas.
Look, it doesn't take a lot of snow to shut an entire Texan city down because they don't have salt trucks, they don't have sand trucks, they don't have plows. I got off high school once for 0.25 inches of snow and then immediately bragged to all of my New Jersey friends who on the same day got a foot of snow and didn't even get a delayed opening. So pretty big.
I'm actually a little worried about that because I'm heading to Austin this weekend for tryouts for the U.S. national team for the World Games circuit. And it's supposed to be freezing rain potentially while I'm out there. So we'll see how that goes.
If anything, you will be used to these cold elements and it'll put you at an advantage and you'll be all set.
Yeah, my hands will be slightly less numb than everybody else.
So we are here to continue our discussion of Chapter 5 of The Sea of Monsters. We are picking up where we left off. We left off with Chiron leaving, which is very sad. But before we pick it up and continue discussing this chapter, what's your history with the Percy Jackson series? How did you become a fan of the books?
My path to Percy Jackson is probably a little bit different than most. In 2010, when the movie came out, I was in an era of my life where I was living in the Bay Area, kind of on the peninsula. I was in my 20s, didn't have much going on. And so Thursday night was movie night. And so whatever movie was coming out, I'd go see it at midnight with one of my buddies.
That's so good.
Percy Jackson just happened to be a movie coming out that year. So I went and I watched the movie. And so that was my introduction to it. And this is going to probably ruffle some feathers, but I actually enjoyed the movie. As someone who had not read the books, it was a very enjoyable movie. I was like, okay, that was fun. Flash forward, I meet my now wife. We had the sequel to the Percy Jackson movies coming out, and I was like, oh, I saw the first one. This could be fun to go see together on a date because she also loves fantasy and things like that. She's like, but you should read the books. And I was like, okay, sure. So I started reading the books and still had a positive memory of the first movie. Read the first two books to lead into the second movie, and I don't think I've ever been more disappointed going to the movies than the second film in this franchise. Should not have read the books. Maybe I could have appreciated the second movie, but even then, dumpster fire. From there, though, I've actually read now every book that Uncle Rick has written.
Whoa.
So, yeah.
That is super cool. I'm very excited to make my way past the books. Not that I want to be done with these books because they're already fantastic, but it's more of my wife is now onto the sequel series. So she's on the second book in the Heroes of Olympus series. And she keeps laughing out loud or gasping while reading if we're next to each other in bed or on a train or whatever. And she keeps wanting to talk to me about them, but inherently she can't. And she won't be able to until like 3 years from now.
That series, I think, of everything that Rick wrote is my favorite.
I've heard a lot of people say that they really like it. And I guess it would make sense. He's already got a full book series under his belt, and now he is writing another one. He's got that experience. So I've heard people say, obviously the PJO books are the first one and they are the closest to my heart, but in terms of like what are the better books, I've actually heard a fair amount of people say they like the sequel series better, which makes me very excited to get to it because it's not a world in which the post-main series is trash.
It matures a lot, which is I think what I like about it. The writing is better. I like how he presents the stories, so it's something to look forward to. And then even then, the spin-off series are just so much fun. Like you could tell he just lets loose.
Ah, good. I love that. I'm very excited for it, but I'm also very excited to continue our discussion here. So, as I mentioned, Chiron is gone and everyone is sad, Tyson included. But we move on and we continue. So the big conch shell has been blown and it's mealtime. So Annabeth heads over to the Athena cabin. Clarice then enters with the Ares cabin, and she's looking pretty beat up given what just took place in fighting giant bulls. Someone, though, has taped a sign to her back, and the sign on it, instead of saying "kick me," says "you moo girl." And is that supposed to be a "you go girl" joke? Because it doesn't land.
I couldn't figure it out, and maybe some of your listeners will be able to actually tell us what's happening there, because you moo, like with how Clarice was described in the first book, like to me, I think that came off as just a very inappropriate and not cool insult.
Totally could just be a size joke, yeah.
But then I feel like that conflicts with like, I feel her standing in the camp is pretty good, so why would people bully her? But like, it feels like bullying.
And not only why would people bully her, but she was a pivotal part in saving the camp from this attack. I don't understand the point of the insult is, oh yeah, remember that time Clarice saved us all from dying? What a dweeb! I don't understand what this bully is going for. It's not funny. Why would you make fun of Clarice based on what she just did? But also, why would you make fun of someone who could beat you up very easily? I truly don't get what this person is going for here. And beyond all of this, Clarice just went through a very hard situation, and so did the whole camp. Maybe just back off on pranks for 5 minutes? Anyway, next comes in the Hephaestus cabin, and it is made up of 6 guys led by someone named Charles Beckendorf, a 15-year-old African-American kid. He's big, he is an elite crafter, he's nice, and he just goes by Beckendorf, which I think very much tracks as someone with a generic first name and a kind of funky last name.
I still feel like Beckendorf is a little bit of a mouthful for a nickname. Why not just shorten it to Beck? I feel like that'd be like a nice, strong, solid nickname. Like that was a miss for everyone who has to say that mouthful every time.
Right. Beck would totally make sense, but I can definitely sympathize with the phenomenon of if you've got a generic first name and a last name that isn't generic, that's going to happen. In middle school, I was called every iteration of Schubert that exists. Lots of Shubes, Shuby, all that kind of stuff, or just straight up Schubert. So I can totally understand this happening, and I think it tracks, and I think, again, this is probably just Uncle Rick being a teacher, knowing what would happen. No one's going to call this guy Charles or Chuck or Chaz. When you've got a cool last name like Beckendorf, yeah, you're going to get called Beckendorf. Like, that's a very fun name to say. The other cabins then arrive, as do the Naiads, the Dryads, and the Satyrs. And then narrator Percy reveals that Satyrs do odd jobs for Mr. D around the camp. And I don't know if I just missed this being established in the first book. And I know they made statues and did some other stuff. But since when are the Satyrs Mr. D's assistants?
I feel like it was tackled at some point, but I don't want to dive into it because I can't remember if that was in the actual first book or if that's something that potentially is brought up later.
Got it.
Or it could just be from additional. I love Greek mythology, so it could just be from other knowledge outside.
Okay. Makes sense. I appreciate you defaulting towards not spoiling something for me. But yeah, I was worried that this was going to happen to the Satyrs because I ran into this stuff with Harry Potter where if you weren't a wizard, you were just treated as lesser. And I didn't want that to happen with Satyrs because the only Satyr we really met a lot, Grover, was so nice. And every other Satyr seems pretty nice. Even the Council of Satyrs seemed like nice folks. So to have them be less important, quote unquote, than the campers and just be doing odd jobs for Mr. D feels a bit odd, unless it's a situation where the Satyrs are older and they're not campers. So I don't know, like there could be other stuff, but it just felt a little strange.
Yeah, I could see it being less of like Satyrs are less than people and more that gods just don't have true empathy for other beings besides themselves. And I think it's more that situation than it is, because I don't think the campers treat them any differently.
No.
I think it really just comes to Mr. D just being, well, a god who doesn't care about mortals.
Got it. Yeah. Okay. That could track. That could make sense for sure. So the Hermes cabin now arrives, and because of, the whole Luke situation, they have a new leader, or actually leaders, and their names are Travis and Connor Stoll. They're brothers. They're not twins, but they still look very similar. And narrator Percy says, quote, "I'd always thought it was funny that the god of thieves would have kids with the last name Stoll, but the only time I mentioned it to Travis and Connor, they both stared at me blankly like they didn't get the joke. And while I was reading this, I stared at my book blankly for 5 seconds trying to figure it out. And then I realized, oh, like stole, S-T-O-L-E.
See, I saw it immediately, but that could just be my inner dad joke coming out.
Yeah.
But I could also see them just playing it off like they've heard it too many times.
Yes.
And just like, nah, we're not giving you the satisfaction.
I would hope that that's what it is, because I do this a lot with a last name of Schubert. A lot of people in my life have made a Schubert-related joke to me. And what I always do 100% of the time is if anyone ever makes some sort of Schubert-related joke, I say, oh my God, that's so funny. I've never heard that before. And then people go, wait, really? And I go, no, I've heard that every day since I was 4. Completely unoriginal. But yeah, I guess you being an actual dad gives you the dad joke x-ray vision that I am just cultivating. I have a little bit of it as an uncle, but I need to level up to truly see it and not have to wait those 5 seconds. So once the last cabin is seated, Percy brings Tyson to the middle of the pavilion, and then some Apollo kid murmurs, "Who brought that?" in italics. And then Percy shoots a glare at them, and Mr. D says, well, if it isn't Peter Johnson, my millennium is complete. Percy corrects him, saying it's Percy Jackson, and then Mr. D says, yes, well, as you young people say these days, whatever.
Very relevant to the mid-2000s.
Yes, Rick Riordan, very aware of how to write an out-of-touch old person, and I think that's great. I think his senses for knowing what is cool and what is not, because whatever in 2006 definitely had been phased out by then, but just barely. So this is a perfect joke for him to make. And then the narrator goes on, and again, this is another detail that if I missed this in the first book, I am truly sorry. When describing Mr. D, narrator Percy says, quote, "He was wearing his usual leopard pattern Hawaiian shirt, walking shorts, and tennis shoes with black socks." Did they mention in book 1 that he had a leopard print Hawaiian shirt? Because my goodness.
I feel like that was mentioned. I don't know if that was a regular occurrence, but yeah, Mr. D was always kind of described as more of a, we'll go with eccentric style.
Yeah. They even, I think, in this book say he looks like a Vegas tourist or something. I've always imagined him to have very Wayne Knight from Jurassic Park vibes. I feel like that would be the perfect casting. Give me Newman as Mr. D. That would be perfection.
I would love this. That could be great for the upcoming show. Make it happen.
Yes.
Talk to somebody. Make a call.
Let's go. Also, we learn that Mr. D has a satyr peeling the skin off of grapes and handing them to him one by one.
Have you ever had a peeled grape before?
No.
I haven't either.
I'm not a dog.
But like, yeah, I don't know. Do you think it's a better experience in grape enjoyment?
I have never been bothered by grape skin, except for one time when I was making a smoothie. I had just recently gotten a blender and I was living on my own in Seattle and I was making a bunch of different fruit smoothies. And one time I decided, what if I put in some grapes, not realizing that grape skins do not blend very well. And that's the only time I've had a problem with grape skins, but just eating them, I don't understand what the joy of not wanting the skin would be. Maybe it's because he's the wine guy and skins, I believe, when you make wine are not part of the process. Like, I think they're
still part of the process for winemaking too. So it's I don't even know what he's doing with his life.
This means nothing. I don't know what's going on.
To me, it'd be a negative experience, right? Like, grapes are a pretty great fruit, and you take the skin away, they get really kind of slimy, and I don't want to be handling that.
The skin holds in the juice, especially if you don't have a perfectly plump grape. You need that skin so that it doesn't seep out all the grape juicy goodness. So yes, this seems like a wild decision. I'm glad you and I are on the same page here. So, narrator Percy continues, quote, next to him, where Chiron usually sat or stood in centaur form, was someone I'd never seen before. A pale, horribly thin man in a threadbare orange prisoner's jumpsuit. The number over his pocket read 0001. He had blue shadows under his eyes, dirty fingernails, and badly cut gray hair. Like his last haircut had been done with a weed whacker. He stared at me. His eyes made me nervous. He looked fractured, angry and frustrated and hungry all at the same time. And we will soon learn that this is Tantalus, and I'm saying Woody Harrelson better have been cast because my goodness.
One, love Woody Harrelson for this role, but two, when I actually first read this, for some reason I read it as tentacle.
Oh, okay.
Not sure why. And then the picture that it came in my head was actually Squidward from SpongeBob. And so I just picture whenever he's mentioned in this book, just like Squidward waving his arms, but being really like angry and like villainous.
I like it. Given how terrible Tantalus is, I think Squidward is a fun image to have for him. That's super good. I also, for casting purposes, I also could see the guy who's in Notting Hill and also plays Xenophilius Lovegood in Harry Potter. I don't know this guy's name, and I'm very sorry to... Is he Irish or Scottish? Whatever country he's from, I'm very sorry, people.
Yeah, I can't get the name either. But no, I like that. He could pull off the right vibe there.
Zeno Lovegood, actor. Rhys Ifans.
Oh, I never would have known that.
Oh, and he's Welsh. I was wrong on both accounts.
Close.
Rhys Ifans is a Welsh actor, producer, and singer. He was the frontman of Welsh rock music bands The Peth and Super Furry Animals. That is a very interesting first sentence, Wikipedia, given that I don't know if that's what he's most famous for. But yeah, he could totally play this part.
We can go to Wales and find out.
Yes, I would love to go to Wales.
Yeah, that could be his origin story. That's what he's most famous for.
Let's go. I'll do a live show in Wales and have him open with The Peth or whatever the band name was. So Mr. D turns to this new guy, Tantalus, and tells him to keep an eye on Percy since he's Poseidon's son, making it very clear that they've been talking about Percy behind Percy's back. We then learn that Tantalus is here on special assignment from Mr. D, and he tells Percy not to cause any more trouble. And when Percy asks, what do you mean by that? Mr. D shows him a newspaper. And this is very funny because I called this out in an earlier episode of TNO, and now it's come true. This newspaper is the New York Post this time, which makes way more sense because the headline in it is, quote, 13-year-old lunatic torches gymnasium, which 10,000% would be a New York Post headline. This is great. Thank you, Rick Riordan. This is so true to form. So Tantalus says that he has also heard Percy caused lots of trouble last summer, to which narrator Percy thinks, oh, like it's my fault that the gods almost had a civil war? Narrator Percy's instinct to just always think these things is so perfect, and I relate to it so much, and I love how sassy he is already. Sassy is a thing, but narrator Percy is the next level up. The things that he chooses not to say to other people, oh, so good. So good.
Yeah, it's impressive that he's able to, one, be that witty, but two, know exactly where the line is to not quite, face the wrath of an immortal being.
Yes, his knowledge of time and place is incredibly smart. He knows when to shoot it out. He knows when to stop it for the most part. Every now and then it slips through. But I feel like if he wasn't the son of the god of water, ocean, horses, etc., he would be whoever the god of knowing where the line is. So Tantalus then tries to eat food and drink root beer, but the food keeps escaping him, and we learn that he's got some sort of curse, that he just can't eat food for 3,000 years, and that feels incredibly rough.
Yeah, this entire sequence actually just paints, I think, gods in a terrible light, right? You have Mr. D, who just clearly picked somebody who was going to be miserable for the campers. He was punished by Zeus to come to this camp and just begrudgingly work with the campers. Like, it just seems like all of their decisions are to actually torment their own children, which is really frustrating. And then the torture, I can't imagine, right? Spending 3,000 years staring at food and not being able to eat it. Mm-mm. Percy brings up a good point here where wanting to know, like, well, what did you do? What was so awful? And how much is he eating you up inside that you don't know?
Yeah. Percy says to him, you're that spirit from the fields of punishment, the one who stands in the lake with the fruit tree hanging over you, but you can't eat or drink. And then Tantalus sneers and says, a real scholar, aren't you, boy? And then Percy says, you must have done something really horrible when you were alive. And he says, what was it? And Tantalus, his eyes just narrow, and he doesn't address the question, which we will soon see is a theme of Tantalus. Instead, he just says, I'll be watching you, Percy Jackson. I don't want any problems at my camp. And a fun note is that when Percy asked him this, satyrs behind him were doing the, no, don't, shaking their heads and waving their hands, which I think is a great detail. I'm excited. I'm sure we will soon learn what Tantalus's deal is over the course of this book. And if we don't, I'll talk about it with Dr. Moya in the next Greek mythology episode. But I was very intrigued. I don't know anything about Tantalus's deal, so I, like Percy, really want to know.
With Mr. D being punished for 100 years for pursuing the wrong, I think it was Naiad, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who he pursued the wrong one. What would you think is a punishment worthy of no food for at least 3,000 years? At least, because it's still going.
3,000 is such a long time. I don't know. Probably depends on who did the punishing, because I feel like if it was Zeus, it would have to be something that isn't as significant, but just made Zeus really mad. I don't know. I'm just going to guess murder, because there's two options based on what I know about gods. Either he killed someone he wasn't supposed to kill, or he made love to someone he wasn't supposed to make love to. And it's one of the two. That's my guess.
What's your overall first impression of this character being introduced, clearly having a pivotal role within the camp? Is this something where you think that Mr. D may be influenced by somebody else? Like, do you have any rash reasoning or just guesses of why this character is existing now? Is this character going to play a major role later in the book, or is it just happen to be filler because for whatever reason we need to send someone else away from the camp for a while?
I like it. I like you instigating for more predictions, which is everyone's favorite part. I think that this is just a Mr. D is grumpy in his punishment in the fact that he has to run the camp. So I think he's just bringing in a friend that he also knows is punished as well, and they're just going to be grumpy boys together. So that's all my read on it was. I do think it's strange that Mr. D was allowed to pick the replacement for Chiron. It feels like Zeus or someone else should have stepped in, given that Mr. D is there on punishment and actively hates the camp. So I don't think that there's any sort of nefarious element here. I just think it's Mr. D having too much power, and just like nepotism often does, I guess. Can you use nepotism for bringing in your friends, or is that only for your family? Anyway, I think Mr. D abuse of power is why Tantalus is here. And I'm not surprised given everything we've learned about Mr. D.
I like that prediction. I think one other element too, they mentioned in this chapter, right, that when the food was kind of going away from Tantalus, there was like a coy little smile on Mr. D, like he was getting some sort of satisfaction out of watching the suffering too.
Yeah. Maybe Mr. D's doing it just for a laugh. Ooh, it's like a misery loves company thing. He knows someone who's in somehow an even worse situation than Mr. D is in by his perspective. And now he won't feel so bad about having to look over these kids if he gets to look at someone struggle to eat food every day and then laugh at them. That could be the play. So when Tantalus says, I don't want any problems in my camp, Percy points out that the camp already has quite a few problems. And Mr. D tells Percy to take a seat, and then he takes a shot at Percy, saying that no one ever wants to sit with him, because he says, why don't you sit at this table? You know, the one where no one ever sits. First off, this is very rude. But second, don't they sit by cabin? And isn't there no one else in the cabin?
Correct. So it's not really a great insult because Percy has to sit by himself, which I actually don't like that rule. It seems odd to me that the camp has that specific rule because it's like, oh, sorry, you're the only child of this one god. Go sit alone at every meal. Kind of harsh.
Yes.
But not a great insult. Not great work by Mr. D.
No, it'd be like if someone had the last name Z and then Mr. D said something like, oh yeah, you always coming in last place when we do stuff. It's like, no, sir, we just do things in alphabetical order. So when Percy tries to take Tyson along to the table, Tantalus says, quote, the monster stays here. We must decide what to do with it. And Percy corrects him to say him instead of it. And he reminds Tantalus that Tyson saved the camp. And Tantalus says, oh, what a pity that would have been. And then Mr. D laughs. And this is what gave me more belief that Mr. D just brought Tantalus in because he's not happy. He knows Tantalus isn't going to be happy either. And they can just really hate their situation together and try to make the camp worse off and get some enjoyment out of that.
Yeah, and if you're going to torment children, you might as well have a friend to do it with you, right?
Right, yeah. Misery loves company, tormenting loves it even more. So Tantalus sends off Percy, and Percy tells Tyson not to worry. Tyson nods and says, I believe you. You are my friend. So sweet. And that makes Percy feel even guiltier. And at this point, I feel like Percy is getting way too harsh on himself with the self-guilt, because just to say, don't worry, it's not like you're making this huge promise. You didn't say everything's going to be okay. You said don't worry, which I think is fine. You can worry when you learn if something bad is going to happen, but no sense in worrying about what table you're going to sit at until Mr. D and Tantalus do something terrible. Then you can start to worry.
I kind of like, though, that he does worry so much. And maybe Percy's realizing that, like, he's been not really treating him as his friend. It's been more like, I'm taking pity on this individual who's kind of been bullied by others. And I don't think Percy so far in the book has seen him as his equal or seen him as a friend. Like, it definitely feels like more of a person following him around who he's just making sure is okay. And I'm hoping there's that self-realization that maybe that's where he's at in this relationship and things can kind of improve for the better.
Yes, I think we see something later in this chapter where it's kind of getting along to that, but we also see a bit of a darker age in the Percy Tyson era where Percy really goes to the next level of not treating Tyson well and really getting bothered by comments and stuff like that. But I agree. I don't think Percy's been the best of friend to Tyson yet. And I'm hoping that as this book goes on, Percy learns to be a better friend and not what you're describing here where, oh, I'm kind of taking care of Tyson and he's this person that I have to deal with, as opposed to this is Tyson, my friend, and I don't care what other people think. But also that is such a 13-year-old vibe. This is an incredibly on-brand 7th grade type thing where if you had a friend or someone that really liked you, followed you around, whatever, friend, brother, sister, any sort of situation like this, it's beyond natural to be embarrassed by that, especially if you start getting made fun of for it. So I think it is very true to form for a 13-year-old boy. So Percy makes his way to the Poseidon table. A wood nymph brings him a plate of Olympian olive and pepperoni pizza, which sounds delicious. I'm a big olive on pizza person. I personally would have swapped the pepperoni for something else because maybe this is a double hot take. But first off, I think olive on pizza is fantastic. And second, I think pepperoni is incredibly overrated. Sausage is the superior pizza meat. Pepperoni, I think, is unjustly in the number one popularity spot.
So what I'm learning is we should never get pizza together because olives is one of my least favorite things on pizza. And like my default go-to is like just a pepperoni pizza, just keeping it simple. I cannot stand sausage, but that's in general, not just on pizza.
Okay.
So that's like just in general, not a huge fan of sausage. And I guess I got to follow up with like the other controversial topping. Are you a pineapple on pizza person?
Here's what I will say about pineapple on pizza, and let me lay the groundwork here. I grew up in the Northeast. I grew up in New Jersey, incredibly high pizza standards. If I'm getting a good slice of pizza, so for my palate, that's thin crust, lots of sauce, not as much cheese. In that case, get the pineapple as far away from my pizza as humanly possible. And I think that's why I really like sausage, is because where I grew up in one of the most Italian towns in New Jersey, it was always Italian sausage and authentic Italian sausage. So it was very high quality sausage. So that's why it was always the top choice for me. But I will support pineapple on pizza if you're getting completely crap pizza. So if you're getting Papa John's, Domino's, Little Caesars, that genre of pizza, I actually think getting a Hawaiian pizza is totally fine because the pizza you're eating, it's not pizza. It is similar to pizza, but calling Papa John's and that kind of stuff pizza is like calling Taco Bell Mexican food. It's kind of inspired by it, but it is not anything close to authentic at all. So in that case, because the pizza itself is so bad, I think getting fun toppings is good, and especially ones with more intense flavors because you're eating such a bland piece of pizza. So I think pineapple on that kind of stuff is great. I also love banana peppers on that kind of stuff like Domino's.
I do love banana peppers.
So I like getting really fun toppings on those bad pizzas because it distracts me from the pizza. Where the reverse, if I go to my favorite pizza shop in New Jersey, Di Lorenzo's, I'm not getting more than one topping because I don't want to mask how good the sauce and the cheese and the crust is. That would be just a crime. So I usually don't get more than one topping at all. Sometimes just straight plain because it's so good. But if I'm getting crap, load it up, baby.
I think it's a fair assessment. I'm with you. When I traveled to Italy in 2014, I only got like margarita pizzas, keeping it simple because everything, it was just basic, simple, and great. I think that's a fair assessment. I think same with like by the slice places. I like specialty pizzas in that environment. Although for pineapple and myself, I'm not a huge Hawaiian pizza fan. but I love barbecue chicken pizza with pineapple.
Ooh, that's funky. And that's another one. I'm not a huge barbecue chicken pizza person in general, but if you're getting a Papa John's type thing, sure, do whatever. I don't care. Especially in New York, there's some dollar slice places that get really funky with it. I've had baked ziti on top of pizzas at the late night open till 3 a.m. type spots. That's fine. If you're drunk, yeah, dude, give me pizza with freaking vodka rigatoni on top of it. Yes, load it up. I don't care. My standards are low. I'm drunk.
Oh my goodness.
But if I'm sitting down at a pizzeria, I only want simple things. I only want sausage or roasted red peppers or onion, etc. Nothing too obnoxious. And yeah, I was just in Italy for my birthday. And first night, Kelly and I got pizza. We got one that was just straight tomato sauce and garlic, nothing else. We got one that was pesto and mozzarella. And then we got one that was a little more specialty, but it was just, I think, still like 3 ingredients. It was like sausage, some sort of veggie and cheese. It wasn't it was so good.
I was really thinking I was going to argue with you on this, but those are all very fair assessments. Quality pizza doesn't need toppings, really. Minimal. As somebody who eats a lot of Domino's, I like to throw on pepperoni and pepperoncinis and extra cheddar cheese because it makes just one somehow delicious mess of a pizza.
Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying that pizza is bad. It's got its time and place. It's just not pizza. It's fine. I love Taco Bell. It's not Mexican food. It's great, but it is not Mexican food at all. It is very different. And if you're in a place where you can't get really good $1 or $2 tacos like I was able to in Houston, yeah, dude, go get a cheesy gordita crunch. You do you.
That is like what I miss most about living in Austin, Texas is breakfast tacos.
Oh, man.
Specifically breakfast tacos. Mm-hmm. That is my favorite food on the planet. And living in the Midwest is just not a thing. Like even breakfast burritos here, they're like, oh yeah, breakfast burritos. I'm like, yeah, but those are like the sad version of a breakfast taco. Let's just go back to Texas, get some food.
Let's do it. Yeah. I was unpleasantly surprised at how limited breakfast tacos are. I did not realize it was such a Texan thing when I ended up moving out of Texas and living in some other places. Pretty sad. Also love a kolache. Oh, man. Anytime I'm back in Texas, all I do is eat Tex-Mex and as many kolaches as possible. And then I leave and it's perfect. Anyway, this is a podcast about a book. I think this is actually probably a great time to take a break for the newly named mid-roll break. Shout out to listener Timo, who sent in an incredible suggestion. We had been calling it the lightning brief for the first book, but now for the second book, we're going to be calling it the Sea of Sponsors. And the mid-roll is more than just sponsors. Talk about updates for the podcast and stuff like that. Sponsorship is also part of it, but the Sea of Sponsors is pretty good. It's too good of a pun, and I'm already excited. Book 3, we're going to call it the Titan's Purse. It's going to be great. So we're going to be switching it up for every book. Love a good pun, making as many as we can. Anyway, everyone enjoy the Sea of Sponsors, and we'll be right back. Hello and welcome to the Sea of Sponsors. Before we get into the sillier, more lighthearted podcast-related things, I wanted to take some time here to first say that my heart goes out for all of the folks in Ukraine dealing with what is truly a horrible situation. And I know that I haven't figured out exactly what I want to make the charitable element of the newest Olympian like I did with Potterless. I have something in the works, but it's pretty big picture. But for the time being, this is something that I wanted to support in any way that I could. So I will be taking all of the ad money from this episode and donating it to Baktak SOS. This is a charity that, after doing some research, I saw lots of folks from Ukraine suggesting as a good organization to support. They were one of the first organizations to provide aid to victims of the military aggression in Ukraine and Crimea. They help find shelter for internally displaced persons. They assist in the evacuation of people from the conflict zone, and they distribute humanitarian aid to people who've been displaced. They also deliver humanitarian aid to frontline settlements, and they provide psychological first aid as well. If you want to learn more about what they are doing, you can go to vostok-sos.org and see what they're doing there. And now let's talk about updates in regards to the podcast. Just wanted to remind you all that we've got a very fun social media game here going for the newest Olympian. We've got @newest_Olympian on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Twitter, I post funny tweets and memes and stuff. Instagram, I post fun photos and videos and stuff. And Facebook is home to the Facebook groups, where we have a spoiler-free and a spoiler-filled version. So if you want to talk with some other folks about the newest Olympian or Percy Jackson or whatever, you can do so there. We've also got a subreddit, reddit.com/r/the newest Olympian. And on that, you can tag things as spoiler or non-spoiler. So no matter where you fall, on the Percy Jackson reading spectrum. You can join in conversations there. And then also, if you join the Patreon by going to thenewestolympian.com/Patreon, you will get access to the patron exclusive Discord, where we talk about lots of fun stuff. So all different senses of community are available to you to talk about the newest Olympian with a whole bunch of wonderful internet nerdy friends. Speaking of nerdy friends, we've got a whole bunch of new people who have joined the Patreon that I mentioned previously by going to patreon.com/thenewestolympian, where you get access to bonus episodes and monthly live streams and director's commentary and a whole bunch of fun stuff, audio bloopers, lots of good stuff. I actually have just recently received the pins. So I'm going to start putting together packages for folks who are at the pin tier and above. So that is a very exciting time. So the enamel pins also, like the stickers, say "Percy ya later," and they are absolutely gorgeous. I cannot wait to start mailing them out. Got to start putting all the packages together, so it's going to be a little bit of time, but I'm super excited, and you can see a photo of that if you go to thenewestolympian.com/Patreon or find us on social media, the two things that I mentioned earlier. So anyway, let's give a shout out to our newest patrons. Shout out to our newest Ultra God tier patron, Mackenzie, and a shout out to a couple of folks who upgraded to the Ultra God status that I missed the Patreon notification from. So I'm sorry that I haven't been saying your name every credits to Colby, Sam, Reeby, Carly Allen, Riley Kiddes, Mary Kelly, and Audra. Shout out to our newest Super God tier patrons, Simone Costa and J.R. Lubb. Shout out to our newest God tier patrons, Priscilla Malta, Shannon Kamala, Brooke Hicks, and Phoenix Baines. And shout out to our newest Demigod tier patrons, Emily Bradley Glure, Ariel Steinsaltz, Patrick Viator, and Elzbieta Navratilova. Thank you all so much. May Athena bless you with the ability to not forget that thing that you came into the room to get. And speaking of support, I want to thank Multitude for having us as a part of the collective. If you're all caught up on the newest Olympian, there's a bunch of other fun podcasts that you can listen to, and one of those fun podcasts is the Queer Movie Podcast. It is, as the name states, a queer movie watch party hosted by Rowan Ellis and Jazza John. You can join them as they research and rate their way through the queer film canon, one genre at a time. So from rom-coms to slashers, contemporary art house cinema to black and white classics, Queer Movie Podcast is a celebration of all things gay on the silver screen. New episodes drop every other Thursday, and you can listen to it by searching for Queer Movie Podcast wherever you get your podcasts. And before we wrap up here, you're going to hear words from a few sponsors who make it feasible for me to podcast as a full-time job. Some of these ads will be read by me, others of them won't. The ones that are not read by me are inserted locally, so if you live in hell, don't be surprised if you hear a Florida-related ad. And shout out to Ariel, who emailed in that suggestion. All credit goes to Ariel M. But anyway, once those ads are complete, we'll get back to this episode of The Newest Olympian. Okay, wow, we're back, and we're here to talk about a book, we promise. So, Percy, after getting this pizza, is not hungry, which I think is impossible, given the day that he has just had. I can understand being very emotional and sick to your stomach so that you don't want to eat, but also, you've been through quite a day. You've exerted so much energy. I don't understand how you're not going to want to eat after that.
From experience of like playing in tournaments where you have basically a 6-hour day of just constant physical activity and you're exerting yourself, adrenaline's going, everything like that. That entire window where I'm active, never hungry. But about an hour after activity, it's just like everything calms down and I'm like, 6 burritos, please.
Yep.
And so my guess is maybe his adrenaline's still going because like with all the news, everything he has going on, because I would be just needing a burrito, needing anything at that point in time because he's already calmed down. He's relaxed. He had his moment. I don't know. It doesn't really fly with me. It makes sense to me that he wouldn't be hungry if he's already had time to decompress.
Yeah, I guess it's got to be the fact that there is still stuff going on because I totally get this. Physical activity, or when I would do improv shows, or now when I do podcast live shows, you're still riding that high for a little bit. And then, yes, once it cools down, I need to eat so much food. So Percy goes up, he does the burnt offering thing, and he asks Poseidon internally, he asks, please send me some help when he does it. And when he puts the food in, it smells like the ocean when it burns, but Percy doesn't know if Poseidon is actually listening or not. Tantalus then gives a very odd first speech where he says that he hopes to, quote, torture or interact with each of you. And oddly enough, interact is the weirder word here. I can't imagine someone saying, oh, I look forward to interacting with you. That's a redder flag than I'm looking forward to torture you.
Yeah, leading with torture at least was upfront about what he wanted to do. Interact is just so non-committal and just awkward, and like, have you spoken to a human being before in your life?
Right. It's pretty high on the what do you mean by that scale. So he goes on to say that chariot races are back. And that gets quite the commotion from the crowd. And he says, quote, "Now, I know that these races were discontinued some years ago due to technical problems." And then someone at the Apollo table yells, "3 deaths and 26 mutilations." And that completely redeems the Apollo table from their previously not so great comment towards Tyson. And I know I talk about Harry Potter on this podcast. I feel like the books have some ties. And obviously I am a former Harry Potter podcaster. But this feels incredibly Goblet of Fire-y, where at the beginning of the year, we're talking about bringing back this thing that has been canceled due to it being dangerous. Come on.
I see the comparisons there, but I feel like it's a little bit different because it's more of a camp activity that was banned. And the reward is not a bunch of money. It's no chores.
Yes.
Which, honestly, I'd take the no chores in that situation over the bag of money because I couldn't use the money to pay somebody to do my chores, right? So
I personally thought the stakes weren't high enough because at first they say the winners get golden laurels, and that's all they said at first. And I thought, this is not worth mutilation and / or death. Tantalus says that teams can start registering in the morning, and then the first race is in 3 days. But then Tantalus goes on to say that the winning cabin has no chores for the month in which they win. And for a teenager, yes, I can completely understand why that would make it worth it, because nobody loves chores. Except I didn't hate chores that I had to do. And maybe my parents were just really good at putting a positive spin on them. But I used to have to mow the lawn in New Jersey, and we had a riding mower, and I would have to mow the front, side, and back. And my dad framed it as, this will help you when you eventually learn to drive, which it did. But it did always in my brain turn mowing the lawn into driving practice, which was way more fun as a 13-year-old kid who was excited to get his learner's permit in a couple years.
So I was going to say, like, I despised chores. And you said as a teenager, it'd be a great incentive. I'm incentivized by this. I want to participate in these races because I am tired of doing dishes. I am tired of cleaning up. I clean up after a toddler. Clean up way too much stuff all the time. But I will also agree that the one chore I liked as a kid was mowing the lawn with the riding lawnmower.
It's fun.
That was the one I enjoyed.
Yes, I was not big on cleaning, doing dishes, whatever. And even now, I gotta say, there's many, many reasons that I would very much promote marrying someone that you love. But a big thing that Kelly and I have done is we decided on what chores we liked and what chores we didn't like. And this is a compatibility thing. The chores that I hate, vacuuming notably, those are the ones that Kelly enjoys. And the one that she hates, doing the dishes notably, are the ones that I like. I don't mind doing the dishes because I usually throw on some sort of podcast and I kind of zen out. Because so much of my day-to-day is podcast related, whether I'm listening to the edits and doing little tweaks or doing whatever, I don't listen to a lot of podcasts at work because it's not an escape for me. It's just more of my job. But when I'm just trying to wind down, I guess, at the end of the day and dishes have stacked up, I throw them on and wash them. And I find dishwashing to be relaxing because that's the time I get to listen to podcasts. But laundry, man, laundry's a rough one that I am in charge of because I'm so particular about my laundry. I wash all my clothes on cold and inside out. I line dry most of my stuff. I had a pair of socks that I really, really liked. And when I would just throw stuff in the washer and then in the dryer that got holes in them, and I was absolutely distraught. And then I looked up how to make clothes last longer, and they said, don't use a dryer as much, line dry, wash on cold inside out. So now I do all that stuff because I don't buy fast fashion-y kind of stuff. When I buy clothes, I wait until they're on sale, and then I debate for 3 days whether or not I should buy this thing or not. And then I buy it, and then I cherish it forever. And I don't want to lose these clothes or have the colors fade or whatever. So I sure make clothes very well, but it makes my laundry process take so long.
I'm in the same boat. I hang dry almost everything. I'm very particular about how things are washed. I'm very particular about how things are folded too. I have a policy that, like, if it doesn't fit in my drawer, I don't own it anymore.
I do the same thing.
And so if I don't fold it a specific way, I don't have enough space. So, like, my wife's not allowed to fold my laundry. It just doesn't work out. It will frustrate me and I have to refold it. So it's like, just don't bother. Yeah. I actually had something tragic happen yesterday. As I'm preparing for my trip, I was washing one of my nice jackets that I've had for years and I love, but it's one of those jackets that, like, you want to make sure it's zipped up when you're throwing it in the washer, just in case. I forgot to. And, like, on the inside, it tore.
Oh, no.
I was, like, super excited. It's going to be cold in Austin this weekend. Like, I was like, that's the perfect jacket because it's going to be 30s, 40s. And that's, like, the jacket to wear in that temperature. And now I don't have it.
Oh, devastating.
Yeah.
Absolutely devastating. No, I can sympathize, especially with the folding thing, because I fold shirts in particular ways. If there's a particular screen printed type thing that if you fold it's going to make a crease or anything like that, I get really picky about that too, to where if Kelly is ever helping me, because she does help with the laundry, she'll help with certain aspects of it, whether it's sorting them or folding some of the things, she will check, is this one I can just fold or do you have to do your special fold? Because I fold like they do at malls and stuff where you do the sleeve, and then thing in the middle. In college, we had one of those plastic things where you could put the shirt down and then go 1, 2, 3, 4. And now I just have to do that with my hands.
Like you had that at home?
We had it in our college laundry room.
Wow.
So in my dorm buildings, I lived on campus all 4 years, and we had a big plastic thing. You could just lay a t-shirt on it, and then you would go 1, 2, 3, 4. So left, right, top, bottom, and you would just get a perfectly square shirt, and it was so good. And because I liked that so much in college, now I do that myself, and I don't just do a simpler way of folding or whatever. Yeah, man, I'm quite particular about it, but at the same time, I'm wearing a shirt right now that I think is 6 years old, and a pair of pants that are 3 years old, and socks that are 7 years old. So my clothes last, but I definitely do the same thing. If a drawer or closet gets too full, I go in, I decide what I haven't worn in a long time, and I donate it to charity. Anyway, Percy Jackson.
And this concludes our podcast about pizza and laundry.
Pizza and chores. Yeah. So with the notion of not having to do chores being announced, narrator Percy says, quote, an explosion of excited conversation. No KP for a whole month? Question mark. No stable cleaning? Was he serious? My question here, what is KP? Did I miss this?
Right. I reread this chapter this morning and I saw the KP and it was right before we started recording. I was like, I don't have time to Google this. I have no idea what KP is.
Let's see. What is KP? Percy Jackson. Oh, there's a Reddit thread from October 5th of 2019. Question about something in the Sea of Monsters. So I'm rereading through the series. I came across something that confused me on page 62 while Tantalus is describing the chariot races. He says no KP for a month. What exactly is KP? KP is kitchen patrol, basically doing the dishes and cleaning up after dinner. So shout out to user YGOmaster07 for asking this, and shout out to RyRy18212 for answering it. I'm going to close this so I don't accidentally see any spoilers.
Smart. I should have Googled that. But why abbreviate that? Like, I feel like there was no need to abbreviate that.
Yeah, especially because I don't know that it was called KP in the first one. If this was established as the acronym everyone calls it, sure. But also, this book has done such a good job of not leaving anyone who missed the first book out of the loop. They've done a very good job of cluing you in. Why would you not call it Kitchen Patrol?
Maybe he had visited a summer camp, like while writing this book, and that's what they called it. And he's like, oh yeah, this is a camp thing everywhere. We'll go with that.
Yeah, that could totally be a thing. Maybe his kids said it once at their camp, and then Uncle Rick just decided this is what everything is. That happened once. I was doing an improv show in Seattle with my improvised hip hop troupe, A Tribe Called Yes. If you're listening to this in 2022, we might be doing another run if you're in Seattle, and I'm going to fly up for it. Anyway, I made a joke one time in a practice. I was wearing a new pair of boots and a cool pair of socks, and one of my friends said, oh, I like your boots and socks. And I said, yeah, got to keep that lower sixth intact, making a joke that like the lower sixth of your outfit is the coolest part. And I had just said this in practice as a joke. And then a couple months later, our friend on the team, Preston, was doing a different improv show, and he used that as a joke to complete silence in the audience because he thought that that was a legitimate thing that people talked about. He legitimately thought that the lower sixth was a way to refer to what shoes and socks you're wearing, and no one in the crowd got it. No one on stage knew what he was talking about. And afterwards, he texted me, and I was like, no, dude, that's not a thing. That's absolutely nothing. I made it up.
But it could be. I feel like sneakerheads out there, you're missing out on an opportunity.
Right? Hey. Let's make it a thing right now. Lower sixth is the way that you refer to your socks and shoe game.
When lower sixth is 100%, you're on fire.
Yeah, because I think that's underrated. Shoe game certainly becoming a thing. Not enough people appreciate the sock and shoe game. And that's what I was getting at here because I take my socks very seriously. And I think that people need to add socks into the respect game.
Yeah, so how do you feel about my outfit for the plane ride tomorrow? My lower sixth is actually going to be some Patagonia wool socks with Crocs.
Look, when you're on a plane, you got to maximize comfort. I have a pair of socks that I specifically always wear on the plane because they are athletic socks, but they're quarter socks, so they don't go over my calf. So they get me a little bit of that compression because my feet get really swollen on a plane, but not too much to where they get uncomfortable, and they're very breathable. Yo, Crocs on a plane, I'm never going to diss anyone's plane fit. I used to, when I was younger, care about that kind of stuff. Now, my comfiest pair of sweatpants for a plane are blue. My comfiest sweatshirt is blue, and my backpack is blue. I look like a straight up blueberry when I'm on a plane, but I do not care because I need to sleep on this plane because that's the best way to fly, and I got to be as comfortable as possible. So I approve of your fit, even though I think Crocs are despicable.
They're the perfect field shoe / water shoe.
Oh yeah, that is totally fine. Things have their time and place, and I have clothes just for utility purposes. But when people wear Crocs in public on purpose, look, I'm not going to yuck anyone's yum, but it wouldn't be my choice. Let me just say that. So Clarice stands up and asks, what about patrol duty? And Tantalus avoids answering the question. He's clearly learned from Chiron that if you don't want to answer something, you just pretend that this was not asked. And I gotta say, I hope that Clarice continues to have a more positive development because I think she is morphing from bully into a better person. And she clearly cares a lot about the camp and the campers. And I like that. And I think this is great growth. And I hope it continues because we love a redemption arc. And if Clarice ends up being a friend by book 5, I'd be so happy. I'd be so overjoyed. Now, a less good thing, Tantalus brings forth Tyson. And he says that Annabeth and Percy are responsible for Tyson being at the camp, and of course murmurs among the cabins. And narrator Percy says that he wants to kill Tantalus. Let's go! Narrator Percy, always on 11.
Straight aggro. Let's go.
Now, Tantalus continues. He says, now, of course, Cyclops have a reputation for being bloodthirsty monsters with a very small brain capacity. Under normal circumstances, I would release this beast into the woods and have you hunt it down with torches and pointed sticks. I did not know that Tantalus was freaking Gaston from Beauty and the Beast. But anyway, he continues, but who knows? Perhaps this Cyclops is not as horrible as most of its brethren. Until it proves worthy of destruction, we need a place to keep it. I've thought about the stables, but that will make the horses nervous. Hermes' cabin, possibly? And this dude, it has not taken many pages for him to be cemented as someone that I despise. Great villain writing by Rick Riordan.
Just terrible person. Although I do wonder, what was this individual like before 3,000 Years of Punishment?
Yeah.
Did they actually do something horrendous and were already a horrible person? Or did 3,000 years of torment and torture turn them into even more of a vile human being?
Yeah, it could be. It could be. The Hermes cabin remains completely silent, but then, much to my delight, because I, at the last minute, predicted this could be the case in the last episode, Tyson gets claimed by Poseidon. And it was something I didn't pick up on at first. It wasn't until the recording when I was talking with Sarah that I reread the quote and realized, they said that it could just be any sort of god, getting it on with any sort of nymph of sorts. And given the title of this chapter, certainly a possibility is half-brother Tyson. And that's what we get. The green glowing trident is above his head. And unfortunately, instead of what happened to Percy, where everyone was very reverent and took a knee, Tantalus gets surprised and shocked and takes a couple steps back. And that's what everyone does as well. And that really sucks. And then Tantalus laughs and says, well, I think we know where to put the beast now. By the gods, I can see the family resemblance. And I hate this guy so much.
It's really interesting because I feel we're seeing something new in this situation where there is a quote unquote monster that is being treated as not something that we need to murder right away. Mm-hmm. Which I think historically so far in this series, just anything that is not considered all wholeheartedly good has been just immediately seen as an enemy. So that's a really interesting development in terms of how we're viewing a Cyclops. And then 2, really interesting to see that there is now another child of Poseidon that could factor into what's happening overall with the larger plot line.
Yes, it is very interesting on many different accounts. And it's also interesting because I feel like this gives Percy a new struggle. And it's similar to Harry Potter, where every single year he's doing these incredible things to save the world, and then something bad happens and he gets taken down a couple pegs and isn't cool anymore. And I feel like this is going to happen to Percy, where sure, he's saved the world in book 1, but now people are going to be like, oh, you're not special. There's another Poseidon person. You're not as big of a deal. And now Percy's got another struggle. I just think this is such a cool choice. It is so interesting, not only to bring in a new character in Tyson and make him close to Percy, but now he's even closer and there's even more intrigue. And I just think this is such a fun choice. And this is so interesting. And I already really enjoyed Tyson. Now I care about him even more. And it's just good. This is very good. This is very great writing and a cool character to introduce and cool character development. And I am very stoked to see where it goes. Unfortunately, when Tantalus says this, I can see the family resemblance joke, a lot of people laugh, and that really sucks. Thankfully, Tyson doesn't notice because he's trying to swat away the trident, which is very cute. And also, I don't blame him because, yeah, that would be surprising if you have no idea what's going on. He's unaware of everyone making fun of him, and he's unaware of how rude they're being to him. And this just, man, my heart goes out to Tyson so much. This is, I just want the best for him, and I feel so bad when everyone is rude to him. And I hope that everyone will see his worth and he will become a beloved member of Camp Half-Blood. We'll just have to see, but oh man. And Percy then continues, he says, quote, I had a new cabin mate. I had a monster for a half-brother. And this, I think, again, points to what you're saying. Percy's not necessarily being the best of friends to Tyson here. So I hope that this can change. And we'll just have to see what happens in chapter 6. But that's the end of chapter 5, and that's the end of this episode. Any final thoughts on the Tyson reveal before we wrap up here?
I feel like the Tyson reveal is pretty significant for where we're at in the story, right? We've learned that both in this series so far and in the Harry Potter series, like trios is definitely a thing. Mm-hmm. And so adding in potentially now a 4th person in this trio, what do you think that's going to do to the dynamic of the group? Do you think that means that maybe we aren't going to see Grover at all in this series, like with the rest of the group? Do we think that potentially maybe 4 is the new 3?
I will say, full context, I have read chapter 6 because I'm doing back-to-back recordings. Normally, I only read just the chapter. So I do know that there's going to be tension between Annabeth and Percy based on Tyson, and I'll not get into any sort of detail there, but if you know, you know. What I would predict here is that potentially at first, it is a little bit going to be a struggle, but given the way the book is set up, Grover is not here right now, so it feels like the quest is going to be Tyson, Percy, and Annabeth doing something, and then potentially saving Grover. I would assume they go out to save Grover. That's what I think is going to happen, but I'm very intrigued for book 3, because you would think that Grover's going to come back, and then they'll all be fine. So I don't know. It is going to be really interesting. I enjoy that this book series so far is just so surprising and is not super formulaic by standard YA or middle grade novel traditions. So you could have 4 people. You could have a book where just 2 of them go on a journey together. I wouldn't put anything past this book series, so I really don't know, but I'm intrigued. I think there could be some initial tension because I already know that there is some in chapter 6, but I'm assuming what's going to happen in this one is that Tyson, Percy, and Annabeth are going to be the main 3 going through their trials to get Grover, and then they're going to get Grover, and then I would assume next step is save the tree. And if my prediction is correct, that I think Thalia is coming back, if you got 5 people now, I have no idea. And Beckendorf has now been mentioned a whole lot. So I don't know if he's going to become a friend. Clarice is in the mix. Like, there's so many people that you could have something that shapes out more like kind of similar to what happened in Harry Potter, where you've got the core 3, but then a bunch of other friends. Like, we always had our Harry, Ron, Hermione, but by the end of the series, you've got Ginny, you've got Neville, you've got Luna as closer friends. So maybe that's what happens. Maybe our main 3 is always our main 3, but then on the outer perimeter, we've got some other people, and Tyson is one of them. But I don't know. Maybe there's a situation where Tyson has to leave the camp because he is a Cyclops and he joins the other Cyclops, and I'm not really sure. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a world in which Tyson isn't around as much. I don't think that our main three is going to get dislodged, though. It could just be for this book, but my guess would be going forward, we're going to have our Grover, Annabeth, Percy, and then Tyson will be a little bit on the periphery. But that would be my thoughts.
Yeah, I'm very excited for you to continue on this journey because there's so much fun in store for you.
I'm very excited. I'm very much looking forward to it. So, Caleb, thank you so much for joining. This has been a blast. If people want to find you doing stuff anywhere, if you are still on the internet, where can they find you?
I guess Twitter and Instagram or at Caleb Denecour. It's basically my child or frisbee. Is about what you're going to see in that space these days. So
pretty good stuff. Best of luck with all of the ultimate things. I hope it becomes an Olympic sport and all of that so I can, watch whatever stream I need to make it happen. But best of luck in all of the stuff and huck 'em well. That's what they say, right?
Yes.
But thank you so much for joining. Listeners, thanks for listening. And until next time, as we learn whatever's going on in Chapter 6, I'll see you later. Hey, thanks so much for listening to this episode of The Newest Olympian. This podcast is created, hosted, and produced by me, Mike Schubert. I also run the social media and the website. Our editor is Sherry Guo. The music is by Bettina Campamanes and Brandon Grugel, and the art is by Jessica E. Boyd. If you are all caught up on the show and you want some more, you can get some more by going to thenewestolympian.com/Patreon. You'll get access to loads of bonus episodes, bonus audio, all the old Potterless stuff, whole bunch of fun things at thenewestolympian.com/Patreon. And speaking of that Patreon, I want to give a huge shout out to our producer level patrons: Lotta Bartova, Kelsey Gillespie, The Damn Steam Nuggets, Emma Cooey, Vicky Garcia, Ellie Housekovchova, Veronica Bartova, Haley Hastings, Robin Garcia, Frida Vikstrom, Megan Moon, Tough Bayfong, Moo Productions, Don't Call Me Nymphadora, Olivia Y, Craig McRoberts, Taylor Payne, Giselle Salvador, Minka Dreesen, Can't I Seaweed Brain, Matt Barger, Peter Johnson the Twin, Sabrina Balsiger, Boney Pony, Getting Stoned with Smelly Gabe, Heather McMillan, Casey Canales, Polly Burridge, Nikki Harris, Tatiana Schmidt, Sandra Rose, Bridget Lowry, Josh Sayer, Percy Blue, Josh Wilkie, Abby Ryan, Shannon Ivanez Aguilar, Wise Girl, Alpacas Are Hope, Milo TZ, Roxas1912, Rafaela, Ashton Gabrielson, Cara Marin, Colby, Marco Redhouse, Falcon, Joey James, Christopher William Boucher, Justin Lux, Caden Max, Sam Ruby, Carly Allen, Riley Kiedis, Mary Kelly, and Audra. If you want to follow the show on social media, we are at Newest Olympian on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and we're also at reddit.com/r/the Newest Olympian. If you want to help out the show in a non-monetary way, spreading it by word of mouth is awesome, and I really appreciate it. You can post about it on social media. You can leave a rating and review on whatever podcast app you're using. You can reach out to someone that you know that you think would like the show, whether it's an email, a text message, whatever, and just say, hey, there's this really cool podcast hosted by this really cool, humble guy, and I think you would enjoy it. If you do that, I would really appreciate it, but I really just appreciate that you listened to this episode, and I hope you tune into our next episode, which will feature the hosts of the Seaweed Brain podcast as we talk about most of Chapter 6 of The Sea of Monsters. But until then, I'll see you later. Hey everyone, how's it going? It's me, ASMR Mike. So I usually commute to the studio via the ferry, and one of the recent times I was walking home from the ferry, the water was a little choppy and it made a really soothing water wave crashing noise, and I just took out my phone and recorded a little voice memo. So what I will be playing out the rest of this ASMR Mike segment to is the sounds of the water underneath the dock that I was on as I waited for my ferry home from Brooklyn. So enjoy these sounds, and thank you for listening.